Well, thanks a lot, everybody coming out on Saturday morning. Can you hear me okay? Yeah, okay, good. Yeah, it's my honor to be here, really, and I agree. Got in last night from Kansas City, and we had a really, a really fun, interesting dinner last night, and but I'm really excited about this topic. I think it's one of the most, probably the most important topic in medicine right now. We're going to talk about the GLP-1 agonists, Ozempic, Mounjaro, Wegovy, and Zepbound. And then the second half is going to be about the SGLT inhibitors. I think that, let's see, the clicker, oh, there it is. I think that in America today, it reminds me of the opening line of one of Dickens's novels. It was the best of times, it was the worst of times. Like, we have these tools, we know more about staying healthy and living long than ever, and America's been going the wrong direction. And it's not our fault. We live in a very, very challenging environment for staying healthy. But what we're talking about today are two sort of hacks, if you will. These are two sort of medications that counteract the sort of toxicity in our environment. And it was sort of victims of our own success here. You know, like it's really a problem of overconsumption. And the U.S. leads the world in the consumption of ultra-processed foods. These are highly addictive foods. You know, sugar is probably the worst, but the fried food, the fast food, all this stuff this makes up about 50% or more of the daily calorie intake for Americans. And these companies, you know, they just take advantage of us. Like, we Americans, we work hard, we play hard, we want what we want, and they know how to push our buttons and get us addicted to all sorts of things. And so we are really dying of overconsumption. And this is life expectancy in years. So this is a comparable country average. And here's the U.S. on the bottom. We were about the same in 1980. Life expectancy has gone up in all these wealthy countries, but we have progressively fallen off the curve. I mean, it really went down during the pandemic. But we've lost 20 years of life expectancy, and it's really been frustrating as a physician who's really passionate about prevention and wellness. You know, we have great drugs for cholesterol and blood pressure and anti-smoking and all that kind of stuff. But the two things that have really, really been the bane of my existence as a preventive cardiologist is obesity and weight problems. You know, it's and then the other thing is, when I round on the hospital service these days in Kansas City, substance abuse, alcohol, methamphetamine. You know, they say HEF-ref and HEF-pef. Now the residents and fellows call it HEF-meth. It's true. I mean, it's often enough that it's sad, but true. It's like we see, you know, and these are problems of overconsumption, and it's hard to break addictions. And these are the projected. You know, we leave the world in obesity, and the other thing that's interesting is since 2010. Deaths due to alcohol have doubled in America. They've gone up, doubled since 2010. The U.S. has the highest drug death, recreational drug death rate in the world, and it's not even close. The next highest country is less than half of the drug deaths per capita that America has. I mean, it's really shocking, and we live in it, we get used to it, but it's like deaths due to opioid overdose is 110,000 people a year. That's more than all the gun deaths, car crashes, and breast cancer deaths put together. You know, it's really, really shocking, and it's really due to these addictions. And this Arthur Schopenhauer 200 years ago wrote, "We can do what we want, but we cannot choose what to want, what to desire, what to crave. And in that sense, we're not free." And a lot of us, we all have our issues. Life is tough, right? It's there's a lot of stresses. And these days when there's all these sort of things that people are actively trying to get us addicted to, a lot of us end up in trouble with this. And that's our problem right there. So, so I just published this paper a couple months ago called The Anti-Consumption Agents, Tirzepatide, Semaglutide for treating obesity and related diseases and addictions and improving life expectancy. This class of medications is the most important class of medications since antibiotics were invented 100 years ago by Fleming over in England. Back then, most people died of infection. You know, pneumonia was first, tuberculosis was second. By the way, they called that the consumption back then. This is a different kind of, you know, consumption that's killing us now, but it's like this is a game-changing therapy. Like, we've been using it a lot in our cardio wellness centers, and it is so gratifying. Like, you see these people, they come back and all their problems that are related to obesity go away, and lots of times their addictions too. We don't tell them to cut back on drinking, but almost 2-1, they come back and say, you know, I kind of don't really crave the drinking like I used to. And so, you know, it's really helping them to kind of make clear choices when they're faced with something that's very tempting. And like the neurologists tell us that there's really only one reward system, whether it's for food or drugs or alcohol or cigarettes or shopping or gambling, you know, people with these various addictions. It's a complex system, and it's dopamine related, but you can see, you know, it's all over different parts of the brain, you know, alcohol, cocaine, but it all kind of ties together in this reward system. And each of us has maybe different things that we're susceptible to getting addicted to, but these drugs are amazing. So for obese people, this is tirzepatide, which I'm going to tell you right now, and tirzepatide is my favorite of the bunch. There's a whole bevy, like dozens of these compounds that are in late-stage development. And literally, they are going to change everything. They're going to change not the obesity, but like the hospitalization rate, the kind of diseases we get. I mean, it's really, really a sort of inflection point in modern history for sure. And this shows this is various doses of tirzepatide, which, like I say, is Mounjaro. Sorry, Mounjaro, and the top line is placebo, and this is over a 2 or 3. Actually a 4-year period of time, and you can see on the full dose tirzepatide, we're talking like 24% body weight reduction, which is it's phenomenal. I mean, that's for the average obese person, that's like 50 pounds. And we often see, you know, we see people lose 120 pounds. It's like, it's sort of rendering bariatric surgery obsolete. And there's other ones coming down the line, like retatrutide, also a Lilly product, that lowers body weight like 25%. This is semaglutide, which is Ozempic. You know, Ozempic is kind of the most famous one maybe, but tirzepatide is taking it over. Ozempic is the diabetic version of semaglutide. Wegovy is the weight loss version of semaglutide. And tirzepatide, it's Mounjaro is the diabetic version, and Zepbound is the weight loss version. They're these are the same drugs, but tirzepatide, as you can see on this, in 6-12 months, it's substantially better at weight loss. And I find it better, like they tend to have fewer side effects to it. These both block the GLP-1, but the tirzepatide also blocks the GIP. It's another incretin hormone that comes from the gut. And so tirzepatide, this is a study of, and there's a lot of studies like this, and I'm going to rifle through them pretty fast. Just, I mean, you'll get the idea. This is new diabetes in obese people followed for 4 years. The people on the bottom here, this is that's tirzepatide 10 milligrams, which is a moderate dose. 15 milligrams is a high dose. Placebo is here. 95% of new diabetes was prevented. I mean, it basically, shuts it down. This is a study of obese people with HFpEF, heart failure with preserved ejection fraction. The most striking findings we've ever seen, and this is a tough thing to treat. I mean, we have the MRAs like spironolactone or eplerenone, and we also have the SGLT inhibitors, which we'll talk about in a few minutes. But this are the most striking findings we've ever seen. Now, these are obese people with HFpEF, but that is a large group of them. Again, like a like a 40% reduction. All-cause mortality in a big trial of 17,000 people with semaglutide substantially reduced. So when all the problems that go along with obesity, whether it's arthritis or diabetes or heart failure or MI, cardiovascular stroke, liver failure, kidney failure, all that stuff, sleep apnea, all that stuff improves. To the extent that the weight comes down, the diseases improve. 25 to 30% of American adults have fatty liver. And when your liver gets full of fat, they say like fat inside the abdomen is the toxic stuff, but fat inside the abdomen, inside the liver is really toxic because the liver is the seat of metabolism. And once you fill it up with fat, it gets inflamed. It just churns these cytokines, inflammatory cytokines, into the system. And it causes everything from macular degeneration to diabetes to dementia and heart disease. So, and it's hard to clear that with just diet alone. This retatrutide that will be probably approved in the next year or so, like about 90% of the liver fat comes out. It basically, eliminates the fat from the liver. Tirzepatide is the only drug that's ever been approved to treat sleep apnea, and it does because it dropped, like in this study, it dropped weight about 20%, and it reduced the sleep apnea index by 51 events, which is about 2/3. And you can see at the bottom, it's related to this big drop in weight that's about 20%. So it also, in people who have chronic kidney disease with type 2 diabetes, it reduced CV death and need for dialysis. And a really interesting thing, this has happened to multiple of my patients when I started them on this, like the people with obesity or type 2 diabetes, younger women who have been infertile, and they call it Ozempic pregnancies, and they turn up pregnant. Like this one lady who works with me closely, she's been trying to have a baby for 20 years and all through the fertility stuff, and we put her on I think she took semaglutide at first, and then tirzepatide. But anyway, she lost 75 pounds, and she turned up pregnant. And this is probably due to polycystic ovarian syndrome. It's a common thing in women. It goes along with obesity and inflammation. And when you get them on GLP-1s, the fat tissue goes down, the inflammation goes down, the ovaries start working again, and the estrogen levels and progesterone levels normalize then when the ovaries are working, and fertility is restored. And actually it works in males too for different reasons. Testosterone is kind of inversely proportional to waist size, and as the waist is bigger, the testosterone is lower. So when the waist comes down, the testosterone goes up and their fertility is better. So this is maybe the most fascinating thing to me, is like this spontaneous reduction in alcohol consumption, and it, like the social media has been way out ahead of science on this, because people will talk about it, and certainly like when I prescribe for my patients, so they come in and we talk, and they're just doing much better, and lots of times they've stopped drinking or way cut back on their drinking without really prompting them. And lots of times they wouldn't even admit to me that they're drinking too much, but we put them on this and they say, like I just don't crave it like I used to. It just doesn't taste as good, and so like I say, alcohol deaths have doubled. And I have a theory why America is leading the world in things like drug deaths, and we have so much trouble with alcohol consumption and whatnot. And I think it's because, like, we humans are intensely social creatures, like ants, really. And we are really only happy when we're woven into a fabric of relationships that support us, whether it's our family and our friends and our coworkers and our community or our church or our, neighborhood or whatever. And in our modern world, like, we spend too much time in front of screens, and then the pandemic made it worse, where we're socially isolating, and we're just not, people aren't as social as they used to be. That's one of the things I really loved about Dr. Kahn's, picked me up at the airport last night. We went over to a restaurant, and we sat around and just had this really delightful couple hours of conversing. And there's just nothing like face-to-face conversation. It's just, and it settles your system down, and it's who we are. It's also why we need dogs and gardens and, it's the same thing. It's like we need to be nurturing life and woven into this, and that's been going the wrong way. It's like we're just, and again, it's not our fault, but but I think that's why we're having all these problems with addictions, you know, when you get lonely and depressed. And anyway, so we have a tool. It's kind of a little ironic that we have to, you know, you could use this by being more social and getting more exercise and diet, but it's hard to do in this environment. And this is like a drug that is a hack that that makes up for living in the environment that we do. So it also reduces opioid overdoses, cannabis use, alcohol use disorder, you know, online shopping, compulsive gambling. You know, the sex story is a little more complicated because, I mean, if that's a one reward system, some people do note that their libido goes down, but more often than not, people are, you know, when their weight comes down, they're feeling better about themselves, they're drinking less, and that's very good for one's sex life, generally. So and we don't see like psychiatric disorders much. Some of the weight loss drugs have had problems with depression and whatnot. That's not a problem. What is a problem is the cost of these things, right? And you know, it's like $1,000 to $1,300 a month. But Novo Nordisk, who makes semaglutide, and Lilly, who makes the tirzepatide versions, they've been starting a price war. And this is just the beginnings of it. And then there's the compounded stuff, but they just passed a law that they're not going to let them compound. But I don't know. I don't think that they're going to be able to prevent it altogether. But in any event, we work with our patients very, very closely to get them on these drugs and keep them on it. You can get Zepbound in vials now at 5, 7.5, and 10 milligrams for $500 a month, and we often have them split doses. And instead of doing it 10 milligrams a week, we'll do, you know, start at like just a quarter of that. That's the typical starting dose. So we can make it, and you know what? It's like it's so worth it because, you know, they feel better. They're more productive at work. Their health is better. They're using less healthcare dollars. So anyway. I do a newsletter, and this last one was, you know, this changes everything, and it really does. I mean, these are phenomenal drugs. I think of, as a cardiologist, I think of that as like my major tools because obesity and substance abuse are so common. But, you know, there is some nausea when you first start it for a lot of people, and especially if you go up, we tend to, I mean, the big question is, do you have to take this the rest of your life? Well, you know, 2/3 of the weight tends to come back in most people in the first year after they stop it. But some people, if you're really mindful, they can stop it and the weight doesn't come back on because they recognize, okay, I'm drinking less, I'm eating less junk food. But in the meanwhile, it's like we don't not treat hypertension or high cholesterol because when they stop taking the drugs, the problems come back. It's like we only live in the moment, and if you can, you know, get their weight down and make their present life happier and healthier, to me, it's like, it's just such a breakthrough. Now, the other class of drugs I want to spend a few minutes talking about is the SGLT inhibitors. For normal weight people, I would argue, like, see, if you're not overweight or obese, like the GLP-1s probably are not your drug. Not saying, you know, 73% of Americans are overweight or obese, which is why I think it's the most important drug since antibiotics. But this might be the second most important drug class, and people don't realize it, but these sodium glucose cotransporters are a drug that turns out that mimic, so for normal weight people, I've been starting this drug on a lot of my middle-aged and older people just to slow aging. And this is, you know, it's called a geroprotective drug. We've been looking for this for, you know, since, you know, millennia. People have been finding things to try to, you know, slow down aging, stop aging, reverse aging. But this actually, I think actually does that. We published this paper recently too about sodium glucose cotransporters for improving health span and lifespan. Health span being the amount of years that you have where you're living, you know, a fulfilling, active life. So age is by far the major risk factor for death and disease. Like, this is on a logarithmic scale. So the Alzheimer's is 10,000 times more likely when you're 90 than when you're 40. And all the way along, you know, diabetes, heart disease, kidney disease, Parkinson's, most every disease that we're, you know, maybe testicular cancer is not that way, but most all the diseases, the older you get, the higher risk for having them is. And our modern healthcare system is like playing whack-a-mole. healthcare. You wait till somebody gets diabetes, you start treating. You wait till they get a stroke, start treating. You wait till they get cancer or dementia, and you start treating it. That's not ideal, because once it happens, you know, you're off. It's hard to really cure it. If you can back up and like slow aging, so that you age more slowly, then that reduces the risk for all those diseases. And we never had anything like that before. Well, diet and exercise will help that, and avoiding substance abuse, but like a drug that would do that would be really, really important. The only thing we knew before was like caloric restriction slows the aging rate in animals, and this is two rhesus monkeys the same age, and one on the left was could eat as much as he wanted, and aged a lot. And now this was not, he wasn't living in the wild. They were eating like chow that wasn't probably that healthy. It was probably the equivalent of American food. And the one on the right just was fed sort of 30% less. But that doesn't work in humans. You know, it's like you can't, I mean, 75%, 73% of people overweight or obese. Now you're asking people to cut their calories by 30%. It just does, it doesn't really work. So this drug slows aging by mimicking calorie restriction, like or exercise or hypoxia, and it does so by upregulating an enzyme called AMPK and downregulating mTOR. It's very complicated, but you know, it upregulates something called, those chemicals upregulate autophagy, which is this cellular housekeeping thing. And it also changes, so you're urinating out calories. It blocks the sodium glucose cotransporter, so that the more refined carbohydrates you eat, the more you pee out glucose, which is why this drug was approved for diabetes back in 2013 or 2012, dapagliflozin, which is Farxiga. And when it came out, I'll have to say, this is a really dumb idea. You know, it's like you're inducing glycosuria. That's going to be bad for the kidneys. Well, this is why we do prospective randomized placebo-controlled trials, because, you know, you start doing those and you kind of go, whoa, what's happening here? This is like so surprising, the benefits we see. So it slows aging at a subcellular level by, like, autophagy goes around. It's something that's, the sodium glucose cotransporter was invented like 600 million years ago by evolution for cells when they're in periods of scarcity, when there's not enough nutrients in the environment, that upregulates autophagy. When this is, and autophagy goes around and checks all the mitochondria, the little power plants in each of the cells. It does a quality check on them, and if they're spewing out too much smoke and not producing enough energy in the form of ATP, it engulfs it, breaks it down into amino acids, and builds new mitochondria. This is what we want. You want to rejuvenate your cells. You know, do fasting, exercise, you know, mountain climbing, that kind of stuff. Or you could take a sodium glucose cotransporter inhibitor, SGLT inhibitor, and what it does is it also gets rid of these zombie cells, which are, as we get older, these like cells that don't divide anymore, but they're still alive, and they're spewing out this noxious brew of biological signals and that sort of slow cognition and cause inflammation and cause frailty and you know, reduce life expectancy. And so these SGLT inhibitors eliminate the zombie cells too. I mean, at least in mice, and improve life expectancy. So this is a complicated graphic, but it was from our paper. And over here, the simple explanation is that you're peeing out glucose and sodium over here on the left. And then that lowers blood pressure a little bit, and weight a little bit, and A1C a little bit. And it increases hemoglobin and increases ketones. And ketones are really efficient fuel. But more importantly, over here, it changes these nutrient deprivation signals, and so that's where it slows aging. And then you get this all these events, like the EMPA-REG trial came out with empagliflozin in 2015, and when this study came out, like my phone just lit up, because we'd never had a drug that improved cardiovascular death and all-cause mortality in diabetes, and this one like reduced cardiovascular death by 38% in this 4-year study. And it was like, wow, is this real? But when you look closely at it, yeah, it was real. And from that time on, like, I've been prescribing this drug a lot more than, I bet per capita, more than any cardiologist in the country, because it's like, once you get used to using it, it's easy to use, and I started using it more and more people, and the results came out. All-cause mortality in almost any big study is substantially reduced. And keep in mind, if you're upregulating autophagy, people have all sorts of explanations why these SGLT inhibitors improve all these things. But the bottom line is, if you slow aging, it will do all the things that we're seeing, like reduce all-cause mortality. Or in the SOLOS trial, I've never seen a randomized placebo-controlled trial. This drug is like an orphan. It's locked inside of a bad company. It never gets, nobody's promoting it, but it's called Inpefa. It's approved for heart failure, but it's an SGLT inhibitor that blocks the SGLT1, which is a sodium glucose transporter in the gut, and that reduces absorption of glucose, and then you're peeing out glucose too. And so in any event, it's a phenomenal drug. In this heart failure study of large, it reduced all-cause mortality by 61% in 90 days. I mean, look at those curves. They separate in a week. It's like, I've never seen anything like this, and nobody prescribes this drug. In fact, the company is like teetering on bankruptcy, but that's a whole other story. So this is the hospital I work at. It's called the Mid-America Heart Institute in St. Luke's in Kansas City. But in most all of these studies with SGLT inhibitors, all-cause hospitalization goes down by about a third. Like when you think about, let's see, who would be a candidate to slow aging and prevent age-related disease, improve life expectancy, and reduce hospitalization? This is why I prescribe this drug a lot to my patients. Survival in cancer patients. Now, like, we don't have big trials like focused as a primary endpoint in cancer, but when you look at big studies in people who have cancer, survival is markedly improved in the people who are on the SGLT inhibitors. Doesn't seem to be advancing. Oh, there it goes. Okay. So CKD, it's approved for slowing progression of CKD. In this study, it like delayed. I mean, if you take the erosion in GFR over time, people with CKD on an SGLT inhibitor will delay dialysis by 15 years for most people. And in CKD and in heart failure, there's like 10% of people who have indications for these drugs are on them, partly because they're expensive, although they'll be going generic in the next few years. We send people up through Canada, that get online Canadian generic prescriptions for $1 a day, and we do that, all the time. But if you look at mortality reductions, whether it's death from all causes, or cardiovascular death, or hypertension, or cancer, or dementia, or all these different things, there's substantial reductions in mortality. It reduces AFib, another disease of aging, by about 18%. And in Alzheimer's, again, these are observational studies, although there's going to be a couple of studies coming out, both for GLP-1s and SGLT inhibitors for reducing neurodegenerative diseases in the next year or two. And I think they're going to be like the best thing that we've ever seen. So I did a newsletter on that topic too. And if you want, my admin can send you these newsletters if you want to read more about it, or the papers for that matter as well. To summarize, like the U.S., we're dying of our own success, and it's from overconsumption and from too many calories and substance abuse. And now we have these anti-consumption drugs, the GLP-1s, that reduce death and disease. We also have SGLT inhibitors, which are also, these are my two favorite drug classes. They reduce age-related disease and hospitalizations. These two together, and they make a great combination for people with obesity or type 2 diabetes. They improve overall health span and life expectancy. They need to be more available and affordable. The SGLTs, like we've figured that out, and all of our patients who want to get it, we go through a website called. We send it through. We monitor all this time to find the best, the lowest prices and the most reliable. But there's this place called offshorecheapmeds.com, which sounds really sketchy, right? But it's based in Calgary, and it's really a cool site. You can pick who makes the drug, where it's coming from, and so we get our Jardians made from Boehringer Ingelheim, but it just goes through India. But in any event, so yeah, I think I'll stop there. And Mohammed, do we have time for questions or?
Definitely a hot topic. So thanks for talking about that. I know there's going to be questions. So what questions do people have?
Did you bring samples?
Yeah.
There's going to be a line out the door.
Yeah. Uh-huh.
Okay.
So I have a question. Anecdotally, seeing a lot more people at the hospital with gastroparesis from these drugs. I get it's just anecdotally, but it's very successful. But we're doing a lot more gastrectomy studies on people suffering from gastroparesis after massive weight loss.
Yeah, so gastroparesis, of course, is paralysis of the stomach, and it's a not uncommon complication of diabetes. These drugs, besides changing the GLP-1s, besides changing the reward pathway, they do slow gastric emptying and GI motility. So a lot of people have some constipation or nausea when they first start it. Then they can also get diarrhea, which was always kind of a mystery to me. But what the diarrhea comes from is at the end of the week when this wears off and the gut kind of starts waking up and moving, sometimes they get sort of a compensatory loose stools. But it doesn't cause gastroparesis, but it will slow gastric emptying. And so if you have gastroparesis, it will make it worse. So that is like a major sort of thing to ask about.
Mm-hmm.
What's your thought on needing to stop the GLP-1 before a major surgery? Does it increase of nausea and vomiting?
Yeah, so the stopping the drugs before a major surgery, I mean, yeah, it does slow gastric emptying. It could cause nausea and vomiting. So, we just do it. It's no big deal. If they're off it for a week, it's not.
Just start them back on the same high
Yeah, we start them the same dose. But if it's more than 2 or 3 weeks, you should have to back the dose back down a little bit because they kind of develop this tolerance over time, and then so if you start somebody on 15 milligrams of Zepbound or Mounjaro, it would be intolerable. So yeah, but 1 week usually is not a problem.
Uh-huh.
Yeah.
Speak about muscle loss and
So yeah, muscle loss is another really great question. So imagine like if I was carrying around a 100-pound weight vest on me all the time, like my legs would get more muscular. This is a compensatory thing. So whether when you lose weight, whether it's through gastric bypass surgery or tirzepatide or semaglutide or diet, you're going to lose some muscle mass. Probably about 20 to 30% of the weight that comes off is muscle mass, and to some degree that's unavoidable. But we are very careful about telling people you need to increase your protein intake. And you need to do some strength training 2-3 times a week, at least 20-30 minutes, 2-3 times a week. And those things are really important for general health anyway. We tell people, when they're on the GLP-1s to try to eat fewer carbohydrates, eat more fiber to prevent the constipation, drink lots of water, and to eat more protein, especially protein at the beginning of a meal. But yeah, the muscle mass, maintaining the muscle mass is really important.
Next question.
Yeah. So.
Question is chronic kidney disease versus polycystic kidney disease.
Yeah. I think that that polycystic kidney disease, for a while, even with the SGLT inhibitors, they said, well, we don't really have data on that. But a couple of my patients with polycystic chronic kidney disease, I've been starting on Jardiance lately, and the nephrologists have given me the green light to do that. The GLP-1s, I just don't know about that. I don't know the details about what kind of people were enrolled in that flow study where there's like a couple thousand people with CKD. But good question. I just don't know the answer.
How long can you keep them on the GLP? For how many years a patient can be on?
Oh yeah, it's no big deal. Once they're on it, it's like easy. It's it's usually a problem of affordability. They're on it, their insurance doesn't cover it anymore. But no, It's so fun to prescribe these drugs because people come back, they're just so happy. You know, they're sleeping better and their sex life is better and they're happy with they're fitting into their old clothes. And I mean, it's really gratifying.
What happens to them when you take them off of?
Yeah, I mean, the studies, you know, it's also new that we're kind of, we're still figuring that out. But one big study shows that about 2/3 of the weight they lost comes back if they're off it 1 year. Some people can keep it off, but you know, those same old cravings come back, and or alcohol abuse or whatever.
Next question.
So in the last 6 to 12 months, it's very often at the end of the visit, you know, you've covered 5 other things, and on the way out the door, hey, by the way, can I get some Ozempic? So how far do you respond to that, or how much of a workup do you have to go in before starting people on this? What sort of demands do you want before starting this? Or you're pretty easy
You know,
to
that's
start
so the question is about like what do we do to screen people, and it is kind of a process if they're interested in it. And lots of times, even if they aren't, I'll suggest it if they have a lot of obesity-related comorbidities. That's why we started the cardiometabolic clinic in 2018. It was the first in the country, and we got some philanthropic funds from a patient of mine whose life was dramatically changed by by starting him on Jardiance, actually. But then, that's about the same time we figured out that these GLP-1s are amazing. So we have, you know, APPs and nurses who are really expert at this, and that does help a lot because, you know, you titrate it up once a month. You're dealing with these issues of, you know, GI side effects and affordability and all that kind of stuff. So it is kind of a process, but it's, you know what, it's so important, and it's the future, you know. So just like find a few people in your office and make sure they get comfortable with it, and it's a team.
Do you think you have failed other things, you know, that abuse the Contrave?
No, we don't ever mess with any of that. No, Contrave, no, that stuff. None of that. Number one, it doesn't work that well. Number two, it's expensive. Number three, there's no data to suggest. Like I show you all this data. It's like mind-blowing. These are like once a month there's something in New England Journal of Medicine or Nature that shows this phenomenal thing. I didn't even mention osteoarthritis. It's the best therapy ever for osteoarthritis. You know, I think that was a semaglutide study where people with knee arthritis getting ready to have knee replacement, and, you know, pain went way down, NSAID use went down, and need for joint replacement went down.
Next question.
Do you recommend increasing monthly, or if they're doing well at, say, 5 milligrams, do you just keep them there?
Yeah, so like with tirzepatide, where do you stop and everything? Lots of times we talk to the patient about how you're feeling. Do you need to lose more weight? What do your numbers look like? But lots of times we will. Semaglutide, starting dose is 2.5. I mean, tirzepatide 2.5, and going up to 5 is the second dose titration, and the 7.5, 10, 12.5, 15. Full dose Wegovy, semaglutide, is 2.4 milligrams. 5 milligrams of tirzepatide gives you 15% body weight loss, which is the max that you get with the max dose of Ozempic. So you know, you just kind of play it by ear with the person, see how much he or she wants to lose and what the numbers look like. But
Next question.
How do you manage patients, elderly patients? I work in SNFs, and they're discharged from the hospitals on Jardiance for
Yeah.
CHF, and then they go to the SNFs. They're elderly. They stop eating. They're not eating so much. Their weight drops, and family's concerned.
yeah.
So do you back off, or you stop it?
So the thing about the question is, like in elderly people who are get started on SGLT inhibitor, the SGLT inhibitors on average lose 3 or 4 pounds. You know, it's belly fat. You kind of peen out glucose, so you mobilize fat from the abdomen, and so it's generally a good thing. But yeah, so for frail people, it can be a problem. And oftentimes, elderly or obese people, the biggest problem with SGLT inhibitors when you're urinating out sugar, like sugar water in a warm, dark place tends to grow yeast. And so they end up with like vaginal yeast infections or jock itch for males. And so it is important that they have good urinary hygiene, and so it can be problematic in that group for sure.
Any pearls for prior authorization for pre-surgical weight loss?
Question is pearls for prior authorization for pre-surgical weight loss.
Yeah, it's a problem. It's a process, and it's like the insurance companies don't want to pay for this, and they are expensive. But like I say, it's holding back the tide. These are way too powerful. They're so important for cardiovascular health, for a lot of things that, like, we're gonna have to just you just have to push. Yeah. You just have to work. That's where a team effort comes along. Physicians and APPs you don't have enough time to be doing all this stuff.
Does it matter on the dosaging on the Jardians, whether it's 10 or 25?
So yeah, the dose on Jardians are 10 or 25. No, I mean, like we never use 25 unless we're using it for managing sugar. But the thing about all the benefits of SGLT inhibitors, when every study you look at, it's completely independent of how much the A1C went down. So it's like, and people just can't wrap their head around that. But I'm telling you, it's the fact that it upregulates autophagy by blocking this fundamental energy sense of the sodium glucose cotransporter. It upregulates autophagy. So 10 milligrams of Jardiance or 10 milligrams of dapagliflozin are pretty much the only dose we ever use. Sometimes we'll use 5 milligrams of dapagliflozin in somebody who didn't tolerate Jardiance, and we use 25 milligrams sometimes and have them break it in half to make it more affordable for Jardiance.
Next question.
Two things. One, I've read, and then I've also kind of heard anecdotally that patients, when they start a GLP-1 and they're obese, they see that drop off in alcohol use.
Yeah.
But then once they get down into a non-obese BMI, the alcohol use starts to creep back up again. And I've seen that a little bit in the literature as well. Any idea why? Is that something that you've seen or that you
Yeah. Do you want to summarize that?
Yeah, the question has to do with stopping alcohol use when you first start the GLP, and then as they lose that weight, she's kind of noticed that alcohol consumption goes back up.
Yeah. I have not seen that personally, but like I say, this is all very much of an emerging, evolving thing, so it very well could be a thing. They have noticed, like in people who, because again, like people need their crutches, and in people who get gastric bypass surgery, lots of times, and they lose the weight and they stop eating all the junk food and the calories, there's a higher incidence of alcohol use in those people. I know that's a thing.
Other quick thing, so just to clarify what was talked about earlier, if costs were not a problem, it sounds like in using these medications indefinitely or like lifelong, the same way you would use like a blood pressure medicine or something like that if it was indicated, is that kind of what the wisdom is, that if there's not a cost issue, we just stay on it for maintenance?
Yeah, the question is, how long do you stay on them?
Yeah, I think it's like these problems are a lot related to the world we live in. It's this sort of a cardiotoxic, obesogenic environment we live in, high stress, and like I'm a huge fan. I always say we take the best of both worlds. Like, get a dog. I read a prescription for a dog last time. It's taken for a walk once or twice daily, refill as needed. Seriously, like it's like there's big studies showing that dog ownership for somebody who's living alone especially reduces all-cause mortality 36% and cardiovascular mortality all-cause mortality 33 and cardiovascular 36. This was a 4 million person study in Sweden where they can't, and they noticed thousands of people who live alone with or without a dog. People who live in a multi-person household, then it's like 11% reduction in mortality and 15% reduction in cardiovascular mortality. It's like, that's a really, really big numbers. And so the diet and exercise and the social ability. But even so, a lot of us can't, you need help. And so I think that, yeah, as far as I'm concerned, I just keep them on it as long as they're tolerating it.
Next question.
Okay, I'll talk about, if you just maintain a healthy BMI, do you need to have the SGLTI to prevent those risk factors you're at risk for, such as cancer, Alzheimer's,
Yeah.
things like that?
Yeah, so the question is, if you have a normal BMI, do you still need the SGLT2 inhibitor?
I mean, I've been using it a lot in my patients for that reason, because they don't. So I have this one of my favorite techs, Shanini. She grew up in Belize. She was having problems when she was 23 or 24, like with sort of achy joints and being a little depressed, and she's totally normal weight. But like one of her grandmas or something said, well, you just need to do some fasting. And so she started fasting like twice a year. And I work with her all the time, so I watch her when she does this. Twice a year, she will not eat any calories for 10 days. Yeah. No, I mean, nobody's going to do that, but she just drinks like some water, there's lemon juice and cayenne pepper in it, and she's, she's not hungry and all kind of stuff, and she looks like $1 million, and she always feels better afterwards. She loses about 6 or 7 pounds, and then it comes right back on, it's like, but so if you could do that, you probably wouldn't need an SGLT inhibitor, but most people aren't going to do crazy stuff like that, That's
within the normal limit?
Where is it better to be on the BMI scale in terms of life prolongation?
Yeah. So, there's this obesity paradox where people who are like moderately overweight tend, in some studies, look like they have a survival advantage. But that's mostly because when people get sick, they get frail and they lose weight and stuff. So if you can stay healthy and keep your weight in the ideal range, which is why we see with these drugs, life expectancy dramatically improves in both of them. Better to be a BMI of 19 versus 20. I think it's very highly variable, and BMI is not that. I mean, I think we look at, when people say, how much should I weigh, or what should my BMI say, I say, like, the most important thing, and Dr. Wright's going to talk about this later in the conference, later today, like, I say, I don't really care what you weigh. I want your waist circumference less than half your height in inches. So if you're 6 feet tall, it should be 36 inches or less. If you're 5 feet 6, it should be 33 inches or less. And probably the less your waist is, the better, because that's that toxic fat in there.
Thank you.
Next question.
I just want you to elaborate on the risk of malnutrition with those drugs and increased risk of depression and
If you could elaborate on the risk of malnutrition and depression with the drugs.
We have not seen depression. I mean, malnutrition, like, the people who are sort of prone to dysmorphic body images and anorexia are usually, I mean, I haven't prescribed that for people who are normal weight. Like, we do see in lots of young women who are 10 pounds overweight or 20 pounds overweight that want this drug, and it does get, they'll get it at a compounder and thing like that. There's something called Ozempic face. Have you heard that? Like, people lose too much weight and they get wrinkles and it makes them look older, So, like everything, I'm sure there are problems related to that.
So what I mean by malnutrition is not necessarily in terms of like fat reserve, but if you don't eat enough,
Yeah. If you don't eat the right kind of foods, that's why we really. It's very true. And in fact, lots of obese people will have low, like, serum albumin. They're not getting enough protein, and they can be malnourished and still be obese. So we do, like, we have a dietitian, and we're hiring a new dietitian who's really enthusiastic, and, like, it's so important. But the fun thing about these drugs is, like we give them nutritional and exercise advice all the time, and they think, okay, I'm going to do this, or to cut back on alcohol. I'd like to say that, a lot of these things take willpower. To change these lifelong habits. And the problem with willpower, it has a half-life of 2 weeks and it's soluble in alcohol. So it's like, they have good intentions, but they can't lose weight or they can't stop drinking. But you put them on this and then you give them instructions and you say, don't eat junk food, don't eat sugar, and then they go out in the real world and they can make the right choices now. So they can eat vegetables and protein and nuts and berries and drink water and not drink excess alcohol and stay away from the junk food places. And it's like, because they're not addicted to it anymore. Their brain, it changes that reward pathways so they can think clearly about choosing the right things for their health.
Next question.
What's really bothered me is that there's this big tide about everyone from health spas to online doctors that are writing for Ozempic. And working strongly with weight loss, which I try to do, one of the things that really came about when people were experiencing gastric bypasses, they had to have psychiatric evaluation for 4 gastric bypasses to try to deal with their depression or underlying causes that allowed them to become obese and live with that. And it turned out, as you just pointed out, 2/3 of people who stop these products will become overweight again because they have not changed their mental health status. So medications, yes, we're gonna be successful, but it's not a long-term solution.
Super great point. You know, it's like, and that's why, you know, we plug all these people, and people get, you can get this online even without a doctor consultation, you know, and lots of very unreliable stuff. So I think it's really important that people get started on these drugs, see a legitimate healthcare provider come in and get this kind of counseling, because the point's really well taken.
Next question.
Thank you. I'd like to get your pearls on how to actually prescribe this. I have many patients coming in who are good candidates and meet criteria, but can't afford it and their insurance won't cover it. So how do you get like the Zepbound, the injectable vials? I don't even know how.
So yeah, you can get the injectable vials. You have to go through Lilly Direct. You just write a prescription, Lilly Direct, and then they, they'll call, and you send that. We send it digitally into Lilly Direct, and then they call and talk to them, and they get payment information, and you have to order it every 45 days if you're going to get the $500 a month for a dose. And so lots of times we tell people to order it like 4, 5, 6 months in a row if you're going to split the dose to make it $250 a month. So then they stockpile it and they want to pay for it for a few months. But yeah, it's a little tricky, and we're learning all the time, and it's very much of an evolving sort of system and availability. So yeah, it's we go through Lilly Direct usually. And there's a Novo Nordisk option too, like that too, where you can get it for about $500 a month.
Yep.
Do you know if there are any oral GLP-1s coming out?
Yeah, there's one available now called Rybelsus. It doesn't work as well as the injectables. And an injection once a week, especially in the auto injector, like most people almost prefer that to taking a pill every day. Lilly has an oral one that just came out with pretty impressive results. I think it was like 10 or 12% weight loss, so better than anything we've ever had orally before. And there's big, high hopes for it. So, like I said, this is very much of it's like a gold rush going on. I mean, there's like all the companies are looking, developing products. And like tirzepatide, as complicated and nuanced as this drug is, the effects it has, it's a peptide of 39 amino acids, just 39 amino acids long, and it does all this crazy stuff, which is why once you figure it out, it's not that expensive to make. So that's why I'm counting on, the sort of competition from other products. Yeah. Yeah. All right, thanks so much for your attention.